Welcome to EyE on You. Edward, the national security law has been implemented in Hong Kong for almost a year, and the law plugs national security loopholes in Hong Kong, so we will be able to focus on developing the economy, improving people's livelihood, and further integrating into national development, providing global investors with a safer, stabler, and more predictable business environment and brighter prospects for cooperation.
Yes, that's the reason why we are having this program, EyE on You. Our show will bring you the real story on Hong Kong's most prevalent issues. We will invite politicians, business leaders, and professionals from different industries to share with us their insights on popular topics. This is certainly a show that you wouldn't want to miss.
Yes, in this episode, we are going to discuss about Hong Kong after the national security law has been legislated for a year.
In June of last year, the NPC Standing Committee approved the national security law in Hong Kong. Ever since the law took effect, advocations for Hong Kong independence and rights has significantly reduced. According to a research, a majority of Hong Kong population are satisfied with the effectiveness of the national security law. Most of the population could feel the stability that was brought by the national security law.
Look, the law targets acts and activities to split the country, subvert state power, organize and carry out terrorist activities and other behavior that seriously endanger national security, as well as activity of foreign and external forces interfering in the affairs of Hong Kong. Actually, most countries have national security laws and specific enforcement agencies. It is common and is the duty of every responsible government to have such laws. Upholding national security and the rule of law in Hong Kong is the cornerstone of continued prosperity and ensures the long-term stability and safety of Hong Kong. There are over 110 of arrests and more than 65 prosecutions have been made since the legislation was implemented. According to the national security law, all institutions, organizations, and individuals in Hong Kong shall abide by the law. Recently, a total 7 individuals connected to Apple Daily have been arrested under the law. Founders of Next Digital, Jimmy Lai, was charged with 3 offenses, including collusions with external forces to endanger national security and conspiracies to pervert the cause of public justice. Today, it is our honor to invite Mrs. Regina Ip currently a member of Executive Council and Legislative Council. She is also the former Secretary for Security, to discuss the impacts and effects of the national security law in Hong Kong over the past year. Hello, Mrs. Ip. Thank you for being our guest today.
Thank you, Eunice, for having me.
Yes. Today we are talking about the national security law, which has been implemented for a year.
Yes.
So over this year, there are 110 been arrested and 65 people has been prosecuted.
Yeah.
So how will you describe the national security law on the effectiveness and whether it can restore our stability in Hong Kong?
I think the national security law has dramatic turnaround of our security situation, put an end to the riots of 2019 and restore peace and stability in Hong Kong. It's welcomed by large members of our community.
Yes, they are all they're like having 2 million of people signing the petition on supporting the national security law last year.
Yeah.
What do you look forward to the future of Hong Kong with the national security law?
I think our future would be much more secure, which would provide a stable foundation for the ongoing implementation of one country, 2 systems.
Some people say that there will no longer be any freedom of speech in Hong Kong ever since there's the national security law. In your opinion, what do you think?
I think that allegation is grossly exaggerated and in fact baseless. In fact, our national security laws are less stringent than many similar laws in liberal democracies. And unless you are somebody involved in promoting Hong Kong independence or local terrorist activity, otherwise there's no reason to worry at all.
Right.
Some people said that the national security law endows too much on the CE and the executive. Do you think it is a true statement, or how would you say that? How is it going to be implemented, and will it affect our judicial independence?
I think it's very significant that the national security law stresses from the outset the principles of common law jurisdiction, such as no retroactivity, presumption of innocence, and all people charged continue to have access to the courts, independent legal advice. As you say, more than 100 people arrested and over 60 charged. So far, nobody convicted. All cases charged have to go through, the due process of our common law system. So it is not as though whatever the CE wants will happen. It is still subject to our independent legal and judicial system.
And I believe some of the pandemic also complains that they cannot get the bail for if they're being charged of the national security law. Do you think it's a right thing to do for not giving them bail?
Now, it's stated in Article 42 that the courts will not grant bail unless the judge is satisfied that the suspect will not commit national security offense again, And so I think all the judges are abiding by that principle. I think bail has been granted in one case, one or two cases. But actually, this principle that we have the jury system in Hong Kong is set out in the basic law, but it is not an entitlement. That has been tested in the courts 10 years ago in the case of Miss Lily Chang. You remember, Miss Chang was charged with fraud and forgery, and she wanted her case to be tried in the High Court, the Supreme Court, but the Secretary for Justice, who alone decides the venue of prosecution, wanted her to be tried in the district court without jury, and the government won the case. The judgment, the case was fought all the way to the Court of Final Appeal, and our judges, including one British one, upheld that principle, that under the basic law there is no entitlement to trial by jury.
And actually, there are a lot of defendants being absconded, like over the last 2 years, or over the unrest and all the arrests. So I think probably the court will be more careful on granting bails or having a more strict bail terms for them.
I think the one judge has been cheated by Hui Zifeng, Mr. Hui Zifeng, who produced forged documents that he was going to attend a climate conference. So I think in the light of such incidents, the judge are, doing the right thing in being more cautious in granting bail.
Some media sources have claimed that Hong Kong has entered an authoritarian era. How would you respond to this?
Again, that is totally baseless and just a very misleading label. We have only 4 national security offences. We have added only 4. Compared to other jurisdictions, Australia has 80 national security statutes. UK is reviewing its national security legislation, in fact launching a 2-month consultation. UK is also tightening up its public order ordinance. So actually, Hong Kong people enjoy a much larger measure of freedom and rights than people in these democracies.
Yes.
As Mrs. Ip is a former Secretary for Security, that at your time you've been talking about the loss of Article 23. Do you think that now is a good time to push forward to Article 23, as some of our members also pushing, saying that it's now a good time? But as we have the national security law enacted already, do you think now is a good time to push forward that?
Hong Kong has a constitutional duty to enact local legislation to prohibit 7 national security offences. The national security law has blocked some of the loopholes. It has plugged important loopholes by introducing the offence of secession, subversion, local terrorist offences, and collusion with foreign power and external elements. But there remain loopholes in our existing legislation which need to be blocked. And our legislation, in fact, for example, on treason, on sedition, on espionage, on theft of state secrets, is very outdated. So I think John Lee was saying, Secretary for Security, John Lee was saying the right thing when he said that we need to start making the preparations in the form of research. I think the SAR government should start researching what other countries have, what sort of similar legislation they have, so that the next administration can get on with Article 23.
Right.
Over the past 2 years, you can see that there are a lot of social problems. In your opinion, how shall the government further promote and educate the national security law?
As you know, the most acute social problem is land and housing shortage. Our government must tackle that as a matter of priority, and the government is working very hard. And there have also been serious problems with education. I think a lot of our young students, children, have been fed wrong ideas about our country. Very distorted version of history, such as the British started the Opium War to stop the sale of opium in China, which is totally factually incorrect. So the government is implementing curriculum reform. And other than that, I do think we need to step up national security education in our schools to make sure that our young people understand from a young age the importance of protecting our country. If our country is not safe, Hong Kong will not do well. So I think these basic concepts, we must be able to ensure our young people understand that.
In primary school and secondary school is very important. This is the fundamentals.
Yes.
How about in the universities? In your opinion, how shall we promote the education in universities?
I think the universities need to strengthen Chinese cultural education.
Yes.
The teaching of Chinese history, Chinese culture. The number of students taking these subjects are falling. I think there ought to be scholarships, and other incentives to encourage in-depth study, and maybe bring in mainland teachers who have a better understanding of our history. I understand mainland China, the schools are doing the same. They are enhancing the study of Confucianism and traditional value systems. I think we need to do the same.
Yes. Other than like the primary school, secondary school, and tertiary school, for me, I think kindergarten we have to push. We have to teach them on national education as well, not just on primary. I think it's quite late to teach them on national education because some children now they learn in a very early stage.
Yeah, but I do know one kindergarten, one group of kindergartens, including they have one branch in Shatin, your constituency, where they teach the very young kids, 弟子規, 三字經 from a young age, wear traditional Chinese costume, and the rites, and the rituals of Chinese culture. In fact, it's very good for character building.
Yes.
The young people learn to be better behaved, not to become British or bullying from a young age.
I think that's maybe we have lack of 20 odd years, 24
We've
years
lost,
of national education.
We lost two
for the
decades,
systems.
Yeah.
That's why I think we need to pick it up now.
Yes.
It's never too late, but we have to do it now.
The national security law have suppressed the symptoms of the instability of Hong Kong. However, I think that there are still a lot of problems in Hong Kong. In your opinion, what does the government have to do most immediately right now?
It takes time to change people's attitudes, habits of mind, and values, because of our past history. A lot of people have been raised in the ideological mindset of the capitalist system, So a lot of people thought that freedom is absolute, which is not true. Freedom is not absolute, And they thought that democracy would cure all problems, That's why you can see from TV, some people thought that Apple Daily is the symbol of freedom, which is not, Apple Daily has done many things which has invaded privacy, spread misleading, false information, instigated people to take to the streets. I know that very well. When I handled Article 23, there were daily calls for people to protest against Article 23. So I think there are a lot of these misconceptions due to Western influence. that the government need to disabuse, but it takes time. It takes time. And the government needs to be more open, more vocal, more forthcoming in dispelling these misconceptions.
So as this is the 100th year of anniversary of the Chinese Communist Party this year, so how significant is the national security law in contribution of the development of Chinese patriotism within the society?
I think after 100 years of the establishment of the Communist Party of China, it is clear that our ruling party has worked miracles for our country. And the implementation of national security law in Hong Kong would ensure that the SAR remains, safe and secure part of the country. And that would contribute immensely to the welfare of Hong Kong as well as to the overall stability of the country. Because after all, we are the gateway to South China, and we are the most open and freest part of China. And we cannot allow Hong Kong to become a base for external influences to undermine our country.
So after the implementation of national security law, what do you think the government should do immediately to help to build up the confidence over the government and for the citizens in this instance?
You know that after the passage of the national security law, and particularly after the departure of the pandemics, 4 were disqualified, 15 resigned. On their own accord, it was their call. Our legislature has returned to order. And we have been able to pass legislation and funding proposals at a much brisker pace. We're going to have elections soon in the coming months. I'm confident that the new legislature will be able to function much more effectively in support of the executive-led system.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Ip.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.